Hey, hey, Dirt Man, how are you doing, brother?
Dude, outstanding. Thank you, Taco. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Listen, I first of all really appreciate you coming on the show tonight because we're going to be discussing, every single aviator out there embraces, and if they don't embrace, they're in the wrong profession. And what I'm talking about is the book that you wrote, Delivering the Right Stuff. Now, for those that haven't read this, and you're a professional, you have to read this book. And the reason I say that, Andy, first of all, the work was comprehensive, um, and it was edible. I mean, you could digest the information. It wasn't clinical. It was personable, and a lot of the anecdotes that you put in there were fantastic as well. So everybody out there, if you are just fledgling, you're starting your military career, you're starting the airlines, you're a GA guy, I highly recommend reading this because uh, we never we have to relive the sins of the past, things that have happened in the past, to be able to progress in the future and do well. So, with that being said, that's my pitch. Andy, Dirtman, how did you come up with writing this book?
Great question. Well, thank you, Taco, for inviting me on. I've been following you for a few years now, and I really enjoy your podcast as well.
I appreciate you.
But yeah, eh, I can thank the airlines because I kept getting furloughed. And so I got furloughed after 9/11 and went out. And the blunt thing here is that United hired me into the safety department. And I was a non pilot in management where I did FSIs, Flight Safety Investigations,
Uh-huh.
did human factor courses. And I got to honestly see behind the black curtain what goes on at a major US carrier to see how we handled safety, how we executed it, how we improved upon it. And then I came back, started flying. They kept me. I had a great boss. He kept me in the position, but as a flying pilot. So I flew Airbuses and I would work flight safety. And then the 2008 financial crisis, I got furloughed a second time.
Oh,
That's so in a way, this is kind of a reinvention story, right?
right.
So I got a job to do some executive coaching up in Prudhoe Bay, and I'm doing that with BP, and that goes very well. And this was 2010, and in April, unfortunately, they had the Deepwater Horizons that sank. So they reached out and they found out that there's a guy with United Airlines safety experience and brought me down to Houston, and I started consulting down there. And in essence, they kept asking me the question is, why are the aviation industry so safe? And Taco, dude, I didn't have a good answer. I was like, it just didn't feel right. And so it took some research. And I learned that if you could read the book first, I could tell you how we evolved over the last 20 years and
Yeah.
got to the system that everybody honestly emulates, that tries to repeat. And that book then allows for me to have a deeper conversation with somebody who actually sees how it's been prosecuted, how well it's been done. And then do you want to go to the next level?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So, I mean, you and I were at Cherry Point around the same time, 91
Yep.
to 94.
Correct.
And you were in 231, which
Yep.
the ace of spades, but I remember you guys had a really bad run of luck. Whether it was on the end of the runway.
Yeah. Bull Delaney.
Oh, Bull, yeah, Bull
Yeah.
Delaney hit the end of the runway, ejected, but the fireball got him.
Yeah.
George Acosta in the
Yep.
Neuse River. You had
And then Liggy.
Lyman Road,
Yep. O'Brien.
uh,
OB.
OB, who works for American now. He's management maintenance guy.
Get
And
out.
yeah, I'll get you hooked up with him.
That'd be awesome.
Remind me. I'll get you hooked up with OB. He's an
Deal.
awesome guy. Um, so there was a really bad run of Class A accidents that either killed or maimed a couple pilots. And so
Yeah.
back then, I remember I worked in the safety department in DOS, and we were just having to do the safety stand downs in the CRM,
Yep.
which I didn't realize. CRM basically started in 81, and then by the time it was a second iteration, probably around 89 or 90, 91 was a third iteration. And that's when you and I were in the fleet and we were having to teach CRM to the squadron pilots.
Yep.
Go go back though, because that's what fascinates me about your book. Safety, airline safety, didn't really start until the late 70s in terms of stuff would happen. You just kind of, well, why would you blame it on the pilots, right?
It's easy out.
It was an easy out. But then you start looking into the factors that caused it, and it's the why. That's what everybody needed to actually dig down into. Go back to some of the accidents and things that actually created what we have now, like Captain Hill.
Oh, Doug Hill. So, on a quick sidebar, he was the chief pilot. His grandson was the chief pilot at United Airlines for the Airbus fleet, and his name is Doug Hill. Great guy to work for. After I wrote the book, he read my book and sent me a really nice email and gave me a little bit more information behind the accident.
Really?
And yeah, and Hill Air Force Base is named after that accident. It's not in the book, but if you know the history of it,
Yeah.
yeah. So B-17s were being made in the late 30s. Boeing at the time was under duress financially and was trying to sell the next generation bomber to the Pentagon. And as they taxi out, it's called Model 299. 299. And as it's taxing out, Congress is there. There's like 19 folks on the delegation to buy the next generation airplane. And the best of the best pilots who's basically a test pilot, developed this airplane and been living in the airplane for 2 years to make this thing work. Taxis out, takes the runway, cleared for takeoff, max power. And then unfortunately, as you know, the airplane climbs and then just does a hammerhead stall, pitches over and goes into the runway. And it kills 2 of the 5 folks on board. And this is the test flight to get validation and Congress
Yeah.
to buy the airplane. So everybody's kind of looking around and they're doing this. And Boeing was so good and so professional to pull back and go, before we fault this guy. And I'm sure some of it was, he's such a great pilot. This is an unintentional act. They do the investigation, and this has been now known, and this is kind of the benchmark for our industry, that this is the fundamental change that said, if the guy would have read a checklist before takeoff, the event would have happened. Because what had happened is, and it's so, you and I fly very complex airplanes, but at B-17 at that time was very complex in itself. It was new. There's a lot of changes to it. And they said the complexity got in the way for the Captain Hill to remember to release the gust lock. And the gust lock is, you ever got in your car and you move the steering wheel and won't move because the car is not in the ignition,
Right.
what a gust lock is. But for some of your listeners, they may not. And that's what happens. You get into the car and everything's frozen. These guys put full power on the airplane with everything frozen, and then it's just too late to fix it. So,
Yeah.
and you sent me a note, I think that's Snodgrass. I went and read his investigation as well after that. It's an identical accident, quite frankly.
It is. I mean, Snort was the best of the best of the best, and F-14 guy, and just infamous within the community, famous guy. But the fact that he could get in, we all make mistakes, and that mistake cost him his life.
Yeah.
So you got to follow checklist. But
Yeah.
anyway, the development of checklist and the procedures actually came from, Hill's crash, and then each preceding accident made life better for everybody else, I think. You know what I mean?
Yep. We live, and I love teaching this because we live in a culture that of acceptance of using checklists does not mean you're not good at what you do. So we use it because it's a crutch. This is a great analogy. Ever got in your car and forgot to put your seatbelts on because of a distraction, and you're like, God, something's not right. This is just not. And you're like, holy smokes, I forgot to put my seatbelt on. That's how you and I feel when we don't read a checklist. We think that it traps human errors. That's why the checklist is so effective. And there's a lot of rules behind writing good ones. You and I came into a culture of 80 years of learning that for the single checklist that was made for the B-17 crash wasn't perfect, not even close. It has evolved, though, into a highly refined machine that traps you and my errors before we go flying. The killer items, things like that get done. I'll give you a quick story. And I'm sure one of the principles that American Airlines has is that if you get interrupted while reading a checklist, you're supposed to start at the beginning and go over. What most people don't realize is that's another nugget of knowledge of an accident. And it came with Continental in the 1990s when they were under financial duress. They were bankrupt. And so they wanted to save hydraulic pumps. And to do so, they would actually launch. And once everything's up and fine, I guess it'd be the after departure checklist, they would turn off their hydraulic pumps en route to save wear and tear on them. And
What?
then on the, yeah. And then
Are
on the
you talking
approach
about
to,
the engine
yeah.
hydraulic?
No, not engine hydraulics. This is for flaps and gears. So they just weren't sitting there idling and wearing and tearing on them.
Right.
So they would shut them off, they would secure them. And then, of course, they had main hydraulics for flaps and other things, right? Or ailerons. So what happens is that they would shut them off. And then on the approach descent checklist, they put it on step 5 to turn them back on. So you could lower your gear and your flaps and do your approach. Well, there's a famous incident with Continental where on the descent, they read the first 4 steps of the checklist. Step 5 was turn the pumps on. ATC says, hey, call over to Houston approach. By the way, Saturday morning, blue sky, it's gorgeous out. Crews rested first leg of the day. I think they were coming from Tampa. So they're on the approach and they get interrupted. They switch over to approach control and the pilot picks up on step 6. And he finishes the checklist. They shoot the approach, and it's an MD-80. The first officer is like, something's not making sense, i.e., the airplane's not slowing down, but he can't piece it together quite yet on why. And
Yeah.
he's lowering the gear handle, and they're not feeling the drag, and he's basically uncomfortable. He kind of starts going down that cuss word analogy, and the captain goes, I got the airplane. And like passing 400 feet, the captain takes over the airplane and said, do the go around. You and I feel uncomfortable. We're going to do a go around. He's not, the captain's got it. And he basically lands gear up. No flaps, gear up landing in a commercial airline.
Oh.
And that rule, but so our checklist, long story short, our checklists have been managed, scrutinized, improved upon, where you and I are given something that's been massaged for 80 years. It's a really good tool.
Well, what about the gear warning horn?
Oh, I probably didn't have it at the time. So this is early 92-ish, 93. Maybe Honeywell didn't come out with the software at the time. I'd have to go look at the timeline.
I would
That's
think
from the
that
NTSB report.
yeah, I would think that I mean, I know that there were some people that would pull circuit breakers so they didn't have to hear like a gear horn or other things that folks would do, but, no, God, every single when in the NATOPS version of our aircraft that you had the Harrier, I'm in a KC-130, we always talked about note caution warnings. Note was, "Hey, idiot, don't do this. Something bad, may
Yeah.
happen," or this. Caution is, "Hey, somebody did this. It was bad. Don't do this, or you may die." And warning was, "Hey, dummy, they did this. They died. Don't do
Yeah.
this." Right? Note, warning, cautions. And we have the same thing. We have warnings and cautions and warnings in our aircraft operating manual. So it's kind of funny as you're going through stuff with folks and trying to get them to see the biggest picture. I'm going to tell on myself, and I tell the story to every single crew I've worked with. So was that 5 years, 15 to 18 crews a month? I rat on myself every single time because I never want anybody to be in the situation I was in. Brand new captain, second trip off of IOE. I'm flying with a very senior, experienced FO. So very blessed being DFW guy. You got very senior folks. We're in Raleigh, Durham. The first day, 3 legs, great legs. The second morning we get out there, we push off the gate, and I go, hey, let's go ahead and take care of everything here, and then we'll taxi out. So we get everything done except for the last 3. And as we're taxiing out, ground says, hey, turn right. You're going to go to runway 23 left. 23 right is blocked by FedEx down at the end. I can't back taxi you. And we're like, okay, but we don't have the numbers for that. Our performance only had the numbers for 23 right. So he says, not a problem, Taco. And I'm going to go heads down. I'm like, roger that. So I'm taxiing. He's down pushing buttons. And if you ever, well, you're an Airbus guy, but in our airplane, the first block airplanes, when you do a runway change, it automatically defaults to flaps 1 26K highest motor. So when he pulls the paper TPS out,
Yeah.
and he's looking at it. Now we have already briefed flaps 1. The flaps are set at 1. When it pulled up flaps 1, 26K. He's looking at the TPS, and he changes the motor to 24K, but he doesn't fat finger 5 into the box for the
Yeah.
takeoff.
Yeah.
That's the first mistake, right? We're taxiing up. There's a ER 145 up there, PSA 145, has a cargo door indication light. He used to fly him. He's talking to the guy. Hey, I recommend you go back to the gate, whatever. So he gets out of sequence, like you're talking about, right? Stop the checklist. Well, he gets out of sequence. He gets back into the cockpit, and he's, okay, where was I? Oh, I did this. He flips all the switches on the mechanical checklist and goes through them all. Flaps, we closed out this. We've got flaps 1, 24K, winds, weights, temperatures, boom, 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 boom. And he flips all the switches. And I basically, coming out of the schoolhouse, we were kind of trained, your event after event, you're at the end of the runway. So you're like looking down to make sure you're on the takeoff page. The flap corresponds. You got the handle and you got one green light. So I literally was one green light, flaps, one green light, good to go. And off we went. And I sat there and I thought to myself, man, when we rotated, we really rotated long down the runway. And I thought, there's no way that this was a balanced field. And my first thought was the folks overloaded the airplane. So it was
Yeah.
heavier than
Yeah.
what they reported. Well, 3 days later, Focal calls me up. Hey, Captain Bell, anything strange about your takeoff out of Raleigh? And I'm like, yeah, now you mention it, we did really rotate late. And he goes, yeah, that's because you're a flaps 1. You're supposed to be 5. I'm like, wait, what? And I pull up the TPS. I go, no, flaps 1. He goes, no, that's for the long runway. You took off on the short runway.
Shorter runway.
And they can see every keystroke that guy had made. They could see, he pulled up the new TPS, the whole 9 yards. And he gets all that information. And as we're talking about it, I'm crushed. This is not right. It should never happen. How, and it really bothers me. How did I get through the Swiss cheese? I mean, we did flows, we did checklists, external resources, and 145 is not going to know. We got down to the end, and you're looking at threat error module management table, and you get through the Swiss cheese. Now you're at aircraft handling knowledge and skill, right? And all I could think of was I just came 10 years international, hadn't flown 7.3 in 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And every airplane I'd been on, 75, 76, 777, 78, when you did a runway change, it pulled the correct numbers out of the atmosphere, out of the interweb, and you never doubted the numbers. It would just work.
Yeah.
So it bothered me. And then going back through the book, the captain shall, will, and ensure the flaps are properly set. Well, as I was going through it and filed the ASAP, it was accepted into the program. Both the FO and I put our ASAPs in. And for those that you don't know, an ASAP is a program where you basically tell on yourself what happened. And the information gathered through the ASAP program goes out and disseminates to different safety departments through all the airlines. So if they see a trend of people doing something, well, then that can be addressed. And because they told on themselves, they get basically a pass if something, there would be no violation against you unless it was intentional. If it's intentional, procedurally intentional, pink noncompliance, then you are going to get hammered. It's not going to save you. In my case, it turns out I was the 9th guy in the fleet to take off wrong flaps. So they called me and the FO and said, hey, we want you guys on a telephone call. We're trying to figure out how we can curb this. The FAA is very interested. So the FAA and their head check airman, lead check airman, FOQA safety, union safety, company safety, it was like 12 against 2. And they're talking to us on the line. And I'm like, well, first of all, it's not his fault. This is completely my fault because it takes an IQ of 140 to be an airline pilot. That's why there's 2 of us. I should have set the brakes, taken the stuff, but I had that bias of being with a very being comfortable because I was with a very experienced FO and I'm the
Yep.
new guy. And the 3 legs before, day prior were awesome. So I said, "What I've thought about this long and hard. How could you have prevented this?" And I said, "Well, how can you prevent this?" "Well, update the software so that the box downloads the correct information." "Oh, we can't do that. It's 10.8, whatever." "Okay, fine. Go back to when I was a flight engineer. We had this guy from East Texas, and I read the mechanical checklist, and I flipped the switch, and I get the flaps." This guy would go, he sounded like Slim Pickens. "Well, I got 5 here on the paper. I got 5 on that little Commodore 64 computer. I got 5 on the handle. I got a 5 green light." And all he had to say was 5 green light. But he covered all 4 items, and I told the guy, I said, "If we just did that, we would trap that 100% of the time. We would
Yeah.
not have any more stuff, right?" Well, then the guy, said, "Well, did you print your paper?" And I'm like, "No, I don't print it. It wouldn't have saved me because there was no numbers for 2, 3 left." So, I became a check airman about a year later, got invited, interviewed, did it, and then I would stand up and I was like, "Man, when are we gonna ever change this one thing?" And so now the FOs, they're at the gate, they push off the gate, start the engines, captain says, "I have a salute," flaps, whatever it is, 1, 5. The FO is supposed to turn and look at the TPS and confirm that matches this. That's great, except for, let's use Dallas in case. You go 18 left, you're all set up for 18 left, flaps 1. But then you get out there and ground says, "No, you're going to 17 right," which is a shortened runway now. So it's flaps 5.
Yeah.
And the TPS actually had 1 on here. No, it had 5. So we had to switch to 5. But if you don't check that again, then you don't get it. Or if you print up a new TPS, and in my case, say 24K flaps 5, and then the N1's 91. I tell everyone, if you just do this and have your FO circle the motor, the flap, and the N1 setting, you will trap that error 100% of the time. And I tell
So
folks that story because I never want them to be in that position I was in.
yeah. So let me
And the
pass on to
Yeah,
great story because there's so much to unravel in it, right? So do you know the psychology behind why your suggestion works? And then
the part 1, part 2 of the
amen,
brain.
brother. Yeah. So what you've done is solved it because you turned on your conscious processor. So I just spoke at a conference yesterday with PG&E, which is a large utility provider out in California, somewhat infamous, I guess. Um, okay, so um, the problem is with checklists too, and this is a little bit the struggle with some industries going, "Hey, we want to be like the airlines. I want to grab checklist." But if you write a checklist that allows you to automate your response, okay, so 2 times 2, 4, you're not thinking about it. If I asked you 17 times 24, you're going to think. And that's the difference in your minds and how it answers questions. When it's automated and you're flat, no doubt you brought up bias. So biases exist in system one thinking. When it's an automated answer, you
Yeah.
bring biases into that situation. And that's exactly what bit you that day. And then you came up with a solution because of you said, I need to be in my book. You remember how I bolded certain words?
Yes.
That's a technique to turn on system two. System two is the smart processor. It's the one that'll sit down and figure out what 17 times 24 is. And
Right.
that's the one that we use to trap errors. We use system one for procedures, flows to get us off the gate in an expeditious, but hopefully somewhat error free. But we know we're not perfect. The checklist traps it because it's got to be written in a way to slow things down, not automate our responses, and absolutely validate the position of the switch or the flaps.
What's funny is medical terms, Tacoma. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So the mind sees what it wants to see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
The gear handle was down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is a classic. I'm flying to John Wayne, where the whole reason of the flap problem existed because this LA crew took off out of John Wayne flaps 1. Somehow it pulled up flaps 1. They saw 1. They took off 1. They're supposed to
Yeah.
be 25. They're going to Palm Springs, so no hull loss or any issues, but they were close. So it
Yep.
really highlighted the issue. We're flying to John Wayne. I'm flying with a senior FO who's senior to me. He just flies Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Half of them get bought for training. He goes into premium. He's a happy camper. He said, why do we still see a slide showing 19 incidents where guys made it to the runway with the flaps up
The
or in
wrong
the
position.
wrong
Yeah.
flap position? And I said, because of this, blah, 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 blah. And then I told him my story. And he looked at me and he goes, you idiot. I'm like, dude, I'll take that. I screwed up, man. I'll take that. Well, this is classic. Where we get off the gate, I look at him, I go, flaps 25, because we will not be those guys, right? Tuk, 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 tuk. Drops him down to 25. He's holding his iPad in one hand. He has a TPS or the closeout in the other hand, and he's pointing at the box as he's briefing. And he goes, flaps 25, 25, max power 27K bump, blah, 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 blah. Winds, weights, temperatures, no restricted articles, 168 souls, blah, 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 Seco K. And he goes, briefed. And I said, man, that was a great brief, except for one thing, Bob. And he goes, what's that? And I go, we're doing flaps 25, right? Yeah. Yeah. Why does the box say flaps 1? Dirt. I'm telling you, Andy, he freaking came unglued. He really became unhinged. He looked down, and his first thought was, I had somehow, but I was sitting over here with my
Yeah.
arms crossed, watching him the whole time. He literally was looking at the box. The box said flaps 1. He said out of his mouth 25. And I looked at him, I said, and that's why it takes an IQ of 140 to be an airline pilot, because it's two of us.
Yep.
And that dude wouldn't talk to me until we got past Phoenix, heading back to
Yeah.
Dallas. Finally, he goes, he's looking out the window. He's just pissed. And he looked at me, go ahead and say it. Say what? Say it. Call me an idiot. And I go, dude, I'm not going to call you an idiot. I literally told you that, kind of those that have and those that will, but it's called stachoma. The mind literally sees what it wants to see. And you just now experience that. So that was kind of, that was juicy. I love that one.
Yeah. Well, and so you brought up a couple of things about an ASAP program, which is important. So, so you get this culture that people are willing to share mistakes with management, right? Which is rare. It's hard to do that. To go, hey man, I made the mistake, wrong flaps. I could have really changed the outcome of, honestly, the financial price of our stock, the well-being of our passengers. And yet, I'm going to share this with you because I trust the management, the company, to take the data and not point the finger, but to take it and trend it. And when you can come back and go, there's 9 other people that made the same error, and now they're trying to attack the right problem. They're going, well, they're all susceptible to it. There's something wrong in the systems, and it's not worth the 1% chance that one of these airplanes doesn't get airborne. And that's, if you pin me down and said, what pivotal moment in the airlines has made our safety record so good? And
Yeah.
it's the incident, it's the ASAP program, it's the ability for us to have trust with who we speak with and tell our incidents, and then how management takes it, trends it, and improves our system.
Well, you've got to go back. So when you do submit to ASAP, it gets desensitized. So your name is not attached to the incident.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
In
stand on
that
the
case,
ERC.
it was actually Union Safety that called me and said, "This is an issue. Would you be willing to talk?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "And we'll buy you off your next trip." It was a 3-day trip for 1 hour of conversation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was good. But
Yeah, I was
they
fortunate
do,
enough to sit on the ERC for 5 years.
yeah.
And
So
so
you would see that all the time. So
dude,
you
I've
would
seen
see
all, and I would read these de-identified reports and go, man, it's not about who, it's about what. And you'd
yeah.
look at it and see the risk to it, look for solutions to go, is this a one-out event or is there a trend here? And that's what these guys were able to do. The company and union work together in that solution, right?
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing, that they
It,
do
it,
take
it,
that information, the company acts on it, the safety department. And, even though we are all in competition, as airlines, right? The safety is above everything.
yep.
And our safety guys, United, Delta, Southwest, everybody gets together for those conferences. And I know that I was in John DeLue's office once, and when he was a safety manager, and he picked up the phone. He was speed dial his compadre over at Delta about something,
Yeah.
and so it doesn't matter. It's a we all share information within the airlines so that we can better ourselves because we do not want to be on CNN, and you definitely don't want to watch the families going through the horrible things when you have an incident. But
And you can actually approach it too with the sense that you and I know it's preventable. If we have an accident nowadays, man, you've got a lens that says, it's a failure of a system. But in the end, you're like, there was some data. There's noise in the system telling you it's failing. You could probably talk quality and Boeing as well in this, that there was indicators that things weren't going to go well and eventually caught up with them.
yeah, with Boeing. But I mean, go back, look. If you look at some of the most horrendous cases of haul loss with, we're $1 billion liability if we crash. In the 60s and the 70s, within both ATC and the airlines, between say PSA and the 172 outside of San Diego with the midair,
Yeah, a long time
that
ago.
was
Yeah.
a breakdown between ATC and the aircraft. But that kind of stuff, and also the midair that the Air Force had off the coast of Africa, with which brought about TCAS, and we started getting TCAS in all the aircraft so that they can um, interrogate each other, and then if you're
Solve
going
it.
like this to each other, you can solve it. He's climbing up, and you're maintaining, and all of a sudden your computer system is going to tell you to climb. It's going to tell this guy to descend. So if you follow the parameters that the computer is telling you, you'll be able to avoid a midair. So
Yep.
all of those crashes and all of those things have led to better production systems, things that can make us safer, is what I'm saying. But some of the stuff like I never knew about the airplane that ran out of gas. The was it TWA or United? The
No, that would be
707
Portland. Yeah, that's Portland.
Portland. Yeah, which
Yeah,
who
that's
was that?
kind of the pivotal CRM event.
Yeah, go into that. I mean, talk about crew resource management.
Yeah, so I can't remember the date. The year might have been 72. Forgive me for not having it known or forgotten it. But yeah, they took out of Denver, going to Portland. Unfortunately, they went to lower the nose gear on the approach or lower the landing gear, and the nose gear didn't come down. And so what they did was they went out and held 20 miles from Portland outside a neighborhood, and they went through the troubleshooting procedures. Interesting enough, Mitch, the captain was an LC, we call them LCPs, LCA. So he's check airmen and
Right.
want to be very methodical, go through the processes, and they spent too much time troubleshooting it. They even sent the relief pilot back there to go, hey, in case this doesn't work out, put people in the exit rows that are employees that can open the doors. So they really managed it at a level where almost honestly flying the jet got away from them. And number two or number four motor runs out of gas. The captain and his behavior to the other two crew members as they're trying to speak up and offer, hey, we got a different piece of the puzzle here. We're looking at the fuel and saying we need to go back and land. That's the bigger threat now. And the
Yeah.
communication got stuffed and kind of it wasn't heard by the captain how his tone of voice could shut down other crew members, became highly toxic, and they honestly just basically took their seatbelts and made them a little bit tighter because they felt like their voice or their opinion didn't matter in solving the problem because he had the rank, he was the captain, he's in charge. And that's their own lives they put on the line for that response. And
Hope and hinting.
unfortunately, yeah, and it wasn't strong enough hinting, and that's kind of where the genesis of cuss words came out of. I'm concerned. This is shoot, I'm concerned, and this is and then it goes all the way to say, if I forgot the you, what the heck?
Yeah. Are you sure you want to do this? It's unsafe. Uh,
It's like
uh,
an anyway. Well, we can edit that out. That I forgot what cuss word stands for.
oh, that's funny. Um, no, no, no. So
I'm uncomfortable. So it's
yeah.
I got a concern. I'm uncomfortable with it. Now it's unsafe. Now I got a good friend here who used to fly for Emirates over at United, or he's at United now, but flew for Emirates. He's got a really good approach. There's actually words you ask prior to using cuss, and he's
Like
so
what?
right. You ask open-ended questions. Are you sure that's enough fuel to make it to Portland? And that it allows the barrier, because when you use cuss words, the relationship's already broken.
Right.
And so they've come up, and I think it's really clever. They've come up with some predecessor words to say in order to use cuss only as the trump card in the conversation. And the way they ask their questions are very, very, I think it's the next gen, if you will, when it comes to cuss words and CRM. It's a really nice polished touch, and it gets people to listen. Because let's face it, when crews stop listening, you're
Mm.
kind of single pilot, and we're not making the best decisions. It's not what's probably the safest or the best outcome for the folks in back.
Well, the crazy thing is that's what happened to Asiana there in San Francisco.
And
The
and
culture of the captain is the ultimate, and you can't say anything because he would lose face or,
that is
had somebody said, or God, Turkish Air, 1951 landed in Amsterdam in '09, '08 or '09, where the FO's doing a cat or a auto land.
with the radio altimeter.
Yeah, the radio altimeter was in op. They didn't turn the auto throttle. Well, the auto throttle, that wasn't a procedure then,
That, yeah.
but that resulted in that. So the auto throttles you have to disconnect because it thought it was below, and that
It
27
thought it
feet the
landed,
throttles
so it
come back.
brought, yeah, passing I don't know what it was, 700 feet. Radio altimeter on the FO side was providing information to the auto throttle. So the airplane thought it had landed and brought the throttles to idle. And then as the airplane maintained pitch on glide path at idle speed, she stalled the airplane and they went into the field just short of the runway.
Yeah, yeah, killed 8 people on that one. But
Yeah.
we started training. We would do 1,000 feet, turn the auto throttles off, pull them back, follow the cues for the ILS, and about 500 feet, you get the stick shaker, recover. And
Hmm.
when we do the recovery in this, pushing the nose over, you get a big
Uncomfortable.
windscreen full of dirt, which is
Oh,
uncomfortable.
yeah.
But the thing
Oh,
is, when you push the power up and you got 54,000 pounds of thrust, the nose with the underslung engines, the nose just
yeah.
wants to come up anyway. So you've got to do this ballet of trim the nose down, power, and recover um, to get the laminar flow back over the wing so that you can recover. Otherwise, like they did, they were tail first at 90 knots when they impacted. So that tells
Yeah.
me they were in the stick shaker the
Oh,
whole way,
yeah.
and he was trying to muscle it. And then I think also the auto throttles were not clicked off. So the throttles came back kind of like Delta, going into Dallas at one time with thunderstorm.
Yeah.
That now we clicked the auto throttles off, autopilot auto throttles, right? To keep them from coming back on their own. Geez, I think about so many of these different things. The flight four was it Eastern 402 went into
401.
the Everglades over a light
Yeah.
bulb.
Yep. Channelized attention, teamwork, failure of teamwork on solving a simple problem, quite frankly. Don't forget, so you've mentioned it. So there's something called hierarchy of controls for safety professionals. And you said it in your own scenario. Why can't we just engineering fix it? We talked a little bit about JIPWIZ and call outs with the Continental incident. Why can't we fix it so the human is no longer capable of making sure they follow procedures? Um, and if you can't engineering fix it, you can do a substitution. If you can't substitution it, then you put an administrative control. Administrative control is a lot of the space I work in, which is procedures and checklist. It's not a perfect net. You just read a checklist and didn't catch your own error. That shows you that it's a really great step to the next level of safety, but it's not going to get you to the panacea that you're looking for if you want zero as your ultimate goal.
Right, right. Well, even going through my situation, because I believe me, I lost sleep over this. How did I make that mistake? Yeah. And thank God nothing, happened. There was nothing about it. But how can you do that? Well, I'll tell you about a month ago, I saw I saw something in the sim. Never mind, I can't talk about that. But it was interesting. Put it this way: ground school guys had left something out of place, and then we went in after ground school. The
Yeah.
FO didn't catch it on his pre-flight. The captain didn't catch it when they ran the checklist. The FO didn't catch it on the mechanical, and they had the pressurization in manual. So you got a green light, pressurization's in manual, take off, get through 10,000, get the horn. And they're back there thinking I'm giving them a depressurization problem. So it was self-induced, but the problem was it was a great learning point in one aspect, because when you read the checklist and you say auto and set, you want to make sure you got auto and set. You know, it's one of those. I think you talked about it in your book about checklist, actually confirming the position of something. You know,
It goes back to the psychology of our errors and how we make decisions. And if you touch it, it by touching your switches, it turns on system two. You're validating that it's in the proper position. In this case, it's probably auto.
yeah, yeah, because it's easy to look over, and I think the parallax it's canted towards the captain, and if it's canted the other way in your mind, you just see it canted. If
Sure.
it was probably straight up, it would have stuck out. You know what I mean? Like when you have a bank of engines, you have four. You know, in a C-130, you had four banks of instrument clusters, and you're thinking to yourself, "God, how am I ever going to monitor all these?" Well, the thing is that if one of them even burps or hiccups, it sticks out from the other three. So it really, you can identify it pretty quickly
So
after so much time.
so you brought up Eastern 401, and something that's interesting and it's probably good for your listeners. So if you're at the time, you could actually lean up against the yoke and shut off the
Mm.
autopilot, and you didn't know. And so we were talking about engineering designs. The design is now the horn is so loud that people in first class hear you shut it off, don't they?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
can.
it gives
I've
me
got
a
the
panic attack every time. Rant, 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 rant. Come on, guys, shut that noise off. You know, got to push the
So
button.
there's a substitution fix, an engineering fix on us because those guys that night on 401, the FO leaned forward, troubleshooting, tapping that light bulb to see if it's a light bulb issue, and he's ultimately knocking off the autopilot and not knowing it. They
Right.
also now I think they upped at the time. I think it was 5-7 pounds is what it took to an MD-11 to knock off the from autopilot state to manual state,
Yeah.
and now it's like 20 pounds, right? They put a significant more force against it, preventing an inadvertent disconnect of the autopilot. So now you got the oral warnings, you kind of know now. And like you said, you and I will be sitting in first class flying someplace, and we hear that come off. We're like, we know what's going on up front. Those boys are
Yeah.
they're getting some proficiency flying.
Well, didn't Boeing have that issue as well? Over in Russia, the idiot captain let his teenage son come up to the cockpit and put him in the seat, and the kid was bumped
Oh, I
the yoke on that one as well, and
could
they
be.
ended up
I
just slowly drifting down and crashing. You know,
but
"Papa, Dad," I mean, the voice recorder, "Dad, what's going on?" "Ah!" You know,
yeah, I
too
don't.
late.
Yeah, and so also what's really cool about our industry, right? So we've suffered some tragic accidents, but we've got this incredible run going. It's based off systems. And what we do very well is we address it. We don't change out pilots and go, man, he's a bad pilot, get out. We retrain. We purposely have programs behind. We alter our procedures. We add a line in a checklist. Maybe we delete a line. But here's what I love. Dude, we learn. As a
Mhm.
company, we're part of companies that are always picking, getting information, trending our data, and trying to improve where we are to go to the next level. And I think some of the folks I work with in the past, consulting wise, that's not necessarily the same motive. They're not learning, or they don't have the systems in place that they can build and validate and continue to go out. Spot checks, a low set to go out and watch execution to see how far we drift from our procedures, because we all drift. Lista's going to tell you that we make 5.4 errors per flight. Most
Yeah.
companies can't, if you're making cars when it comes to the quality department, it could be airplanes and Boeings. You couldn't even tell me if I asked how many errors come through that manufacturing line a week. They'd be like, gee, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't even have a system. They don't even have process or standardization on job execution to actually measure to get better. And we get that blessing. We get our changes in our procedures that it's all off good, safety information to make all of us a little bit safer.
So when we talk about CRM, cockpit resource management, and the iterations, when we get down to 5th generation where we get threat error management,
Yeah.
and then we have LOSA, line observation safety audits, which I'm proud to say I got called up and said, Hey, would you be interested in a special assignment? What's that, boss? You go with you guys are going to be on the company side and you're going to help build this LOSA program. We got one guy from the union, three from the company side, and we built it. But it was at a really bad time where guys were the pay cuts and all the stuff that was going on within the industry was the hot topic. And so guys were very distracted. So it was an interesting time to start that. And I am so proud of what it's become in terms of between LOSA and the learning team. Lit, you guys have the same thing?
Yep.
So between the lessons learned and the LOSA observations, they come out with new procedures or, hey, we need to do this better. Um, and that all back comes back to SOPs. So my question to you is, because you bring up the oil fields a lot, and you've done a lot of business with BP or with a company out there, we can get into the cockpit. You and I have never flown together, but we have been trained to the point that you and I can get into the flight deck, sit down, 10 minutes prior, seatbelt sign, APU, fuel, checklist, and then we start running the checklist. You know what to expect from me, and I know what to expect from you. Have they done that in the oil business where those guys know they need to, this guy is only going to do it this way, and he can expect the guy on the other side knows that he's going to do it this way, so when he does this thing on the shaft to bring the pipe down, he's not going to get his arm chopped off or something? Do they have that down where everything is practiced? Like, fold your arms, cross your arms, and then you do it, single engine taxi, and now it's like go backwards. Oh crap! You have to think about it. But do you get them to the point where they can cross their arms and everything is standardized? Do you guys have that?
No. And part of it
Is there?
is it's a very experience based profession. So it'd be like if you and I joined a major carrier and they said, well, Taco, you flew for the Marine Corps, and Andrew, you flew for the Marine Corps. I just need to get this airplane from DC over to Miami. Okay, we would figure it out. It'd be somewhat rough. There'd probably be greater risk because of it, but we
Yeah,
would get it and make it happen. And then the more we started working with each other, relationships would develop. We'd understand our weaknesses and our strengths, and we could solve it and do it fairly well. We would do it to the Taco Dirtman standard, right?
yeah,
But they don't have a global stand department that manages procedures. That's you bring up really what I love doing, and the strength that I think we could share with other industries is how we can standardize workflows, and then that's the basis or the bottom line of execution. It's the minimum standard for the corporate. Once you
yeah,
establish that, now you can measure, you can adjust all the learnings I was talking about. You can tweak, you can make better. And that is, to me, the exciting spot is when somebody can accept standardization of workflows and also realize this is something that comes up a lot, Taco. People are like, well, then I have to exactly follow it. I'm like, no, there are variables. You can't write a standard, an SOP, with all the variables in aviation. You can't do it. All the different airports, all the different approaches, you
mhm,
can standardize certain aspects, and that's all that they've done, maybe the higher risk activities. And we are a part of that system that allows average joes to get into an airplane and do some phenomenal things because the system in place. And I think the root of it, standardization. Interesting enough, I love telling this story because it tells you the power of standardization and continuous improvement. So standardization ultimately, and I'm still trying to research and find the bottom story of where it came out. But in the 1800s, Italy in a hospital, the ninth ward is famous for if you're going to give birth, you had like a 10 times greater rate of your baby dying. And the other wards were much less. And they were struggling trying to figure out why it was so much greater than ninth ward. So you can see, a 20-year-old mother coming in and she gets assigned ninth ward. She almost felt like it was a death sentence. It was that well known throughout the city.
ooh,
And so, yeah, so the hospital started going, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to standardize how we treat the patients in the ninth ward in order to find the deviation to see what's causing the illness. And as they did this, they realized that only the ninth ward, the doctors only worked in the afternoon, and the doctors that worked in the morning for the ninth ward would go down and work on cadavers first.
oh no,
This
they're bringing,
this is pre-washing hands and bacteria.
oh,
And so, but here's the beauty behind the storytelling. They had a system in place to manage change. And until you get away from an experience based model of you and I are pilots, which means we can fly together, but come into no, this is American Airlines standard, this is United standard, and this is the minimum how I expect you to go fly your airplane. And then you can start tweaking and improving and getting better. That's this next step, if you will, of being a lean Six Sigma or a high reliable organization.
Yeah.
And they
Well,
discovered this doctor is now known as the guy that discovered germs. They and became with the protocol of washing hands before doing surgery.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's how germs were first discovered. They didn't, to us, it's foreign, certainly after surviving COVID. But this is no kidding. What it came down to is realizing that working on a dead body and then coming up and giving, helping moms give birth could actually transmit infectious diseases.
Wow. And that was 1800s.
Yeah, I can
What
go back
about
and get the dates.
UPS? You mentioned,
Dude, they're rock stars. I
and
mean,
so
I
how'd
love the
they come up with
story.
110 points?
Yeah. I need to be very good at what they do. If you work for a company that no kidding wants to set the bar exceptionally high, you've got to
Yeah.
have a step by step procedure to go do it. You and I have fallen into that process. That's why we're normal Joes, 140 IQ between both of us, but really the program's what carries us, the system.
Yeah.
And money is so important for UPS, due from efficiency to be a profitable business, just like FedEx, that they've come out where their drivers go through a very, very detailed program. And that's system one behavior. System two, day one, you're uncomfortable because you've got to practice how you hold your keys. So you can pull your keys out correctly and save that microsecond. All right hand turns, how they pre flight, how they load, fewer steps. It's all a Lean Six Sigma project, and
Yeah.
they've gotten exceptionally good at delivering. And their truck drivers, they still do it. I just saw like on LinkedIn that they still give out, and I forgot the name of it. The award winner who hasn't had an accident. He's been like
Yeah.
driving 20 years. It's off the charts on risk management, but it's the system behind that's delivered this safe driver in this case.
Yeah. Oh God, that's amazing. I mean, in our profession, when you look in the military, from the advent of aviation, how many guys died? And how many guys died in training through the years, through World War One, World War II, and Korea, because I don't think they had the steps in place
Yeah.
for proper checkouts and checklists and,
Yep.
the NATOPs. The one thing I don't think we do a good job of, and Teresa always asks, why do you watch these aviation disaster shows? And because I'm fascinated, first of all, is to the why. Why did that plane crash or what happened? Because I want to think about if I was put into that situation and having gleaned that information off of that other person's incident, would that help me? And you brought it up, a great point. Captain Haynes, God rest his soul, landed in Iowa in the DC-10. And
Yep.
he said, if I had to do it all over again, I would have done a power on landing and the
Yep.
wingtip wouldn't have dropped and we would have landed smooth. Everybody be okay. But the other guys that took the ABX flight, that took the missile,
Oh yeah.
and they remembered what he said and they landed power on
Yep.
and it saved their life. So that's why I tell my wife, that's why I watch that stuff, because who knows, one day that may help me. And on a side note, do you remember Mike Brown in our platoon? By the way,
Absolutely.
all right. So Andy and I went to the basic school together back in 1988, and one of our squad mates, Mike Brown, he went to OCS with me as well, and recruiting duty back in the late 90s. Mike's mom is Jan Brown, who was the flight attendant on that flight.
Yep.
And yeah, did you know that?
I did. He told me that.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay.
He
Yeah, it
did.
was like small world, and you got to actually
Yeah.
meet Captain Haynes. How was it working with him?
So he was fantastic. So we had he's probably mid 80s or so, and at United when I was working for the safety department, kind of wanted to bring back an icon. I mean, it's easy to maybe perhaps forget that day and honestly how well he managed illness in an impossible situation. And so to kind of refresh our own pilot group on the importance of communication and CRM, I got to go with him. I took him to the 5 different hubs at United at the time. And he
Uh-huh.
would go and set up his. He had a presentation, a PowerPoint, and then he would kind of go over the event. And he's the most humble man. I don't know if you've ever had the honor to work with him or meet him.
No. No, I passed
He,
away in
he
19.
Yeah, he was, and on a quick sidebar, Charleston Heston played him in a movie, and he used to joke about this, but he didn't take any money. He goes, 109 souls died that day because I couldn't save them, and he goes,
Yeah.
because of that, I'm not going to profit off their this unfortunate day. So
Yeah.
even he went and made a Hollywood movie, etc. He took $0, and so just the character this man was. He was a Marine, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, yeah. What did he fly in the Marines?
He was down in the training. He was down in Kingsville, and he flew. I know his last tour was Kingsville, and he flew whatever trainer they had at the
E2s or
time.
A4s or something back then? Yeah.
Being pre that, I think. But we took him out, and for one, it was nice to people who'd never met him, the younger generation that had not known maybe the history of Sioux City and the accident, and then his delivery of always bringing it back to us and how our life could change very quickly on a mechanical failure you don't see coming, and how
Mhm.
you can work with your crew to still get to the right problem or to the right solution. Um, so, dude, he was just, and
You
he'd
know
get
what?
on the airplane.
Back up
I
1
was,
second. The
yeah,
people probably don't know. So the Iowa flight that we're talking about, this United DC-10, the
yep,
number 2 engine up in the tail blew up and severed all the
yep,
hydraulic lines. So this
yep.
guy's flying a Mack truck at 200 miles an hour, and he can't control it.
No, and they put in the test pilots for Mac Air at the time jumped in the sim, and out of like 9 approaches, nobody could do it.
My
He's the only one who's been
god.
able to do it. He did it better than the
Yeah,
test pilots, which, in my opinion, I have a very high opinion of test pilots. Period. In the commercial airline industry, they're very good at what they do, and these
yeah.
guys couldn't do what Al Haynes did.
And Al managed to bring the airplane. Now, bring in the CRM. How did he brought in a guy from the back? He utilized
Yeah.
his humor. What
Yep.
made him successful?
So, so there's a, and some of this got is lost. We've lost a little bit, probably in history. But as a United pilot, we always sort of like to say, all of us go introduce ourselves to the pilots up front, just to let them know I'm back in 17A if you need me. And it's
Mm,
really a nod to Al Haynes to say, because Dennis Fitch that day did this exact same thing. He walked in, I'm an instructor in the sim building at United. I fly DC-10s. If you need anything, holler at me. He goes in the back. And because he said that, when everything went south on Al Haynes, he's trying to figure out how to fly this airplane that's not flyable, quite frankly. He
yeah,
goes, I got an instructor in the back of the airplane, calls him up, and then he sat behind the throttle quadrant and manipulated the throttles as they communicated the three of them on how to fly this airplane. And
that's
it's just
amazing.
unheard of. Yeah. And
Okay.
and
And
the
so
amount of
left,
pressure.
left, right, and then slowly retract or pull
Yep.
back to get the descent. How did he control the pitch?
It was power. And that
Yeah,
was
but if you
that was
yeah, you
go
pull
ahead.
off too much. Yeah, I mean, but if you pull off too much, the nose wants to. I mean,
So
they
at
have any trim at
35,000
all?
feet, no, at 35,000 feet, there were test pilots on figuring out how to get the nose down and up. And it was a series of errors. It was a series of communications where the airplane almost stalls and pitches. It pitches up, almost stalls, power chopped. Then he full forward on the yoke, and their nose comes back through. If I recall, the guy in the right seat, the FO, he was really taking the strength, the power that it took on the control system to manage
Yeah,
what he could, allowing the power then to give them maybe the finesse to lower the nose. So he was the baseline of pitch, holding
yeah.
it from keeping the nose from pitching
Oh,
over. And then they used the power communication between Al Haynes and him and rudders to get the nose to turn and the airplane to turn around.
wow.
And never thought of instantaneous, emergency crisis. And the guy in the back truly saves the day. And that's where Al Haynes goes. Without CRM, I never would have made it that day.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And it was the communication piece. And you said he's humble. If you meet him, he's a very humble guy. And when you talk to him, he was very receptive. I mean, forget the mercy situation. He was always receptive. It's just his character. So as he bring up the instructor pilot into the cockpit and they start working through their issues, he's easy. He's approachable. He's not, he's not an Eastern. I've got this. I know this. Hey, why don't you
Mhm.
do this in the back and go down, climb in, and look at the nose gear to see the status lights. He wasn't dictatorial by any means. He was like,
Right.
"We got a problems. Tell me what you feel and see and what you think.
Yeah, what a great guy, and plus he had a sense of humor based off the tapes.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. He makes a call to center that's pretty miraculous, but it came through what his humor, his joke was that he said, lighten the
Right, right.
load.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kinda like, you remember Always, that movie with,
Oh,
they were
yeah, dude,
firebombers?
yeah.
I
Great
love that
movie.
movie, and Richard Dreyfuss is coming in, and he's running out of gas, and they're like, "Do you need anything?"
Exact
He goes, "Glider practice."
That's exactly that was Al Haynes in that moment of stress.
Yeah, 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 a little bit of stress and,
A
levity
little bit of humor.
helps
Yeah.
out. Yeah, a little humor always definitely helps out a lot. Um, one thing, you were solo, except for, when you were in the training command, uh, at the RAG flying Harriers, you had 2 seats. But for the most part in your life, you were kinda single seat guy.
Yeah.
And over at my squadron, we had a bunch of these guys who were trained by the Vietnam guys, and their attitude was, "If you can't talk on the radio, you just sit there. I'll let the gunny talk on the radio, and you can put the gear up and down." That was some of their attitudes, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
sometimes you'd fly with some guys, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, pretty nice around the squadron, but you got up in the air, you better know your crap,
Yeah.
which is one way, but I don't think it was the way they would do it. But I remember getting in the, climbing in the seat, strapping in, and this major I was flying with, he was the DOS, and he goes, "Taco, I got 2,500 hours in the C-130. You think I'm a safe pilot?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'd say you're pretty safe. 2,500 hours? Yes, sir, I'd say you're safe." And he goes, "So, do you know if I had a fight with my wife last night?"
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, "Where's this coming from?"
Personal.
"No, sir. I don't know if you had a fight with your wife last night." And he goes, "Goddamn right. You don't know if I slept on the couch thinking about what I said the whole night and got, like, no sleep." And I'm like, "Well, did you?" And he goes, "That's none of your business. But the point is, if
Ah,
ATC tells us to turn left and I turn right, we crash into a mountain. No one crashes half an airplane lives to talk about it." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Oh, okay, so I could say something, you know?" And he opened that door for
yeah.
input from lowly
Yeah.
200-hour Taco. So I really appreciated and learned so much flying with that guy. And I do that all the
Well,
time. I'll say, "You see this badge? Check airman, check pilot, that badge and $4 gets me the same cup of coffee it gets you,
oh,
which
yeah.
means it means nothing." So
Don't
I'm
trust me.
thick-skinned. Yeah, I'm a Marine, I'm thick-skinned. If you see me doing something wrong or I'm not doing something right, I'll yell it out, man. And, I think
Hey,
that opens the
interesting.
door.
So we talked about standardization. So to go back to circle for one moment on something that's really important. A lot
Yeah,
of some of the industries I've worked in, DuPont came up with a program called Speak Up and Stop the Job. And so if you see something that you don't like, call quits and report it, get back together, we fix it and move on. And what I've learned in this journey of, if you will, risk management, um, probably the best. We've never heard of it. Stop the Job was not. You have you ever heard of Stop the Job at American Airlines?
no,
This is such a great example. But you have, but it's delivered a different way, which is standardization. If you see somebody act in a non-standard way, you speak up, you fix it. And
right,
it's amazing the strength of it because we have parameters of when to speak up and say, hey, that's not normal. What's the reasoning, et cetera, and we solve the issue. Where out in the oil patch, somebody doesn't know it. It's only based off their experience. That doesn't look right. And that's the variability on execution and their mishaps, non-productive times, quality issues are by far much greater because they don't have that fundamental standardization of everybody being on the same sheet of music. It's truly it's a blessing in disguise that we have. We don't promote it that way. I would take it to American Airlines to go, hey, we say speak up, but we don't give the reference to go, if you see something that's non-standard, speak up. It's subliminal, right? You and I have figured that out. We're saying it in our briefs to other pilots, etc., but it's probably something that could be exposed and probably played upon even stronger.
mm. But bring back in the oil field, you brought up an example of the guys didn't have something properly set, which in turn caused a buildup of pressure and then an explosion.
Yeah.
What would have saved them on that was, I believe, the checklist, right? That, hey, this
Yep.
has got to be done, this has got to be done. So now knowing that, have they, I kind of imagine they're about 50 years behind us in evolution, but have they started a journey of standardization at all in SOPs? And has it helped?
So when I went over worked for BP for 3 years, and I honestly kind of stood up a standardization program, like an airline would. Instead of having fleets, I had functions. So you had the construction of the well, you had the drilling of the well, the fracking or the completion of the well, you had the operation of the well, and then you had the flow back, which was the highest risk when the well's brand new. And it was to see what standardization would do when it came down to your job execution. And I just ran into the CEO not too long ago, and he goes, Andrew, we have reduced our incidents by 40%.
Oh, good.
And when it came down to money, he said that was $700 million.
Wow, that's awesome. So they
Yeah.
they see the light in the path. They're
Yep.
obviously working the issues.
So they're starting to see the value to it. They're also the part of it, they're cyclical like aviation. It's so weird. They're just as cyclical as oil and gas or aviation, commercial aviation. They're just on the opposite cycles, right? When oil gets really cheap, airlines are booming. Oil and gas is down in the trenches, and then vice versa. And so with those cyclicals, so they lay off people and bring them back. But they don't have that standardization, that knowledge, which is so important, kept in our SOPs. Mitch, you and I get to fly an airplane that's got a couple million years of experience in it, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's been massaged, it's been executed, it's been valued. It's got a LOSA of making sure that we're following them, that we can achieve them. And that very first Save into checklist and that pressure event you described was because it was a fatal accident. And he set a pressure control valve, which should allow him not to overpressure the system. His internal mistake was he sets it off experience. There's nothing to check it. It would be like you and your flaps. It'd be like if you flew every time you're a commercial airliner and you didn't have to check your flaps because the company trusted you, you'd always set the right flaps because if you don't, it's going to hurt you.
right.
And so that's experience based. Now fatigue, poor communications, distractions, home life, all that stuff gets involved eventually into the day when you don't set it correctly. That one day, everything lines up. And then on that day, that was a pig launch, and the launcher exploded because he had the wrong setting in it. And he didn't have a tool like the checklist. And this is the coolest thing because I wrote that checklist for BP. It's a bit of a longer story about how I got to it, but basically, I got invited into the debrief of this fatal accident, and they looked at me out of frustration to go, Andrew, how would the airline solve it? And I did answer a checklist. I just don't know enough about pressure tests to what it would look like. So he assigned me. He goes, well, go find out how to write a checklist like that and get back with me. And I worked with the experts that do those pressure tests, and I just said, give
Right.
me the 7 killer items. And then I wrote it so it turns on system 2. I wrote it with white space. I looked at NASA guidance for writing checklist and made that the standard. And no kidding, a year ago, I'm in a pickup truck out in the oil patch, and a guy pulls out the BP checklist on pressure testing and goes, dude, this is the best thing I've ever that I've ever seen come out of a safety department in oil and gas. I'm like, dude,
That was
that's
me.
my work. Yeah.
Did he buy you
So,
a beer that night?
I bought him many.
I was gonna say he buy you a beer, man. Save his
And
life.
And because what I love about checklist is if you write them correctly, the field wants to use them because they see the value to them. They
Yeah.
read it and go, yeah, dude, I've made that mistake. And I don't want to make it again because this time I didn't get hurt that time. But I know eventually I got so close to getting hurt that it's not worth it. So I have no problem reading it. The other biggest misnomer, Taco, is people think checklists take minutes to read. And in reality, they're 20 seconds. I used to time them and show you it's 20 seconds of your life to read to make sure you did the right things before you
Yeah.
go to the next phase of activity. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm in. I get it. But checklist, my barrier to introducing checklists into the industries, quite frankly, is when I say the word checklist, they don't have checklists like you and I use. Past tense, reviewing work we've already done, interjected at the pause point of execution. Instead, it's during the height of work. And in essence, most industries take a checklist and they shrink down a procedure. So you and I would be taxiing out, reading a taxi checklist that would be shrunken procedures on how to taxi the airplane, which would be, it wouldn't add value.
Right.
We don't have the time, and it's a distraction. I'm asking you to go to heads down and read something that you've already done off memory.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a QC. Our checklists are QC for human factors. The assumption is we've missed something because something got in our way, most likely a distraction.
Where do you see, I mean, we're at what level now? Fifth generation?
Yeah.
Sixth? What do you
I think
see the
coming
future?
next.
Yeah, coming next. What do you in the industry see coming down the pipe to make things better?
It's a great question.
VR? What? I mean, what is the next step?
Um, Good Lord, great question. Let me ask you a quick question. Threat error management, where you at with acceptance? You like it?
Oh,
Think it's very helpful? Yeah, you
oh,
personally.
yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, listen, man. Guys will literally go, "Hey, I'm in the yellow."
Yep.
And his partner's going to go, "Got it. Hey, ground, we need to pull over here and set the brakes for a minute
Yep.
and let's stop and regroup and get back in." But as I tell the folks, I go, "Hey, are you married? Yeah. Whatever you do, when you go home, don't tell your wife to get back into the green." I go, I go, telling her to relax and get back in the green is like trying to baptize a cat. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Well
But
said.
for the folks out there, we have this chart, and so we basically have green in the center, yellow, red, and then the blue's way out there. You're in outer space. But the whole idea is you get overloaded with tasks and time. You get overloaded, and as you are trying to work through your task load increases with the pressure and the amount of time because now you're number two to take off. You've got to do this, and this. So to alleviate that, we've come up with green, yellow, and red. Green, I'll look at a guy and I go, "Hey, you in the green right before takeoff? You good?" And he's like, "Yeah." "How about you?" And I'm like, "Lime green. I'm a Marine." you know, so
Always green.
yeah, I'm always yeah, green. I'm lime green, bro. But if a person gets into the yellow or into the red, which you can see and it's not voiced, you can
Yeah.
see the pressure building up on this person. And then if he doesn't voice it or she say something, the other person, as they notice, they're making all these mistakes. "Hey, how are you doing?" Just kind of cut for a second. "How are you doing?" "Man, I am just, I'm pulling my hair out. I can't get this thing to work." "Okay, let's tell them we want to go hold somewhere. We got the gas. Let's
Yeah.
take care of this." And I think people are a lot more receptive, kind of like I'm sure you guys do the exact same thing because you all talk. But what are your threats? Pilot monitoring. What are your threats coming into this approach?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Personal,
there-
environmental, aircraft.
yeah, environmental, MEL, you've got all that list of things that you can talk about, which will jog your memory. Oh, by the way, our radar altimeter's in op. I've got to turn the auto throttles off on the approach. Or like I tell, sitting there and I go, "What is your greatest threat?" Pointing to the FO on a single engine Cat 1 down to 1800 to the men's. "What is your greatest threat?" "Oh, the weather and da 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 da, single engine." I'm like, "No." And I point to the captain. I go, "Him." Like, "What?" And I go, "He's sitting there looking through this HUD and he's like mesmerized. It's this mesmerizing
Channelized
thing.
attention. Yeah.
And he's looking through it and your mind just kind of drifts for a second. You're like, "What'd I get my wife for her birthday? It's coming up. You know what? No, I got that last year. Where did I take her for dinner? 100 above. No, I took her there. Yeah, minimums. Uh, Going around. Oh crap! I was supposed to do something, and there are the lights over the nose." I go, so, so that's the biggest threat. Tell the captain, look through that HUD over the nose and call the lights at minimums for you. And then
Yeah.
I tell the captain, I go, What's your greatest threat on a Cat 3?" And he's like, single engine. It's Cat 3. It's down to 643, whatever. And I go, no, him. He's like, what? I go, I see 2 out of 10 crews, the FO calls go around and why does he call go around? Well, at 50 feet, the flight director disappears and the radar altimeter, it turns amber. But in their mind, they're looking for something to go wrong, right? They're looking for
Yeah.
something to call go around on, and they'll do that. I said, that's a valid threat, isn't it? Would it not be? Tell that guy, don't call go around at 50 feet when the flight director disappears, um,
Yeah.
or you see that. So, I tell them, got to think outside the box sometimes on what are some threats that you're not really thinking about, but they're out there. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you on the threat or management, probably, or I'm not on threat or management, on the next generation of CRM. And I will offer to you probably because I work in a lot of the industries and I'm trying to pull them up to level 2 or level 3. So I've
Mm.
kind of regressed. So maybe it's not a good answer for you, buddy, but it's a realistic answer.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I wonder about that. We've come so far, and we're so SOPs and standardization and triggers and flows and everything that we are building in for the new generation, um, which
Okay,
we've got to
as you
have.
got my wheel, now you got my wheels turning. It's gonna be Chat GPT.
What?
Yeah, you'll. So I guess what you could probably do is understand the biases we bring to work because it's such routine work. That's our threat, is that we do the same thing day in and day out. And even when the weather's bad, quite frankly, the activity itself is very standardized. Love it. It brings high quality on execution, but you could bring in, you could probably somehow write a chat GPT program that identifies threats and hazards and even trends. Could you imagine if you're shooting an approach and you had a third person that was an AI generated little figure that said, hey, 17% of the approaches are more than 25 knots at 500 feet on this arrival. I mean, if he gave you real time data from your ERC and
Yeah,
delivered it prior to, like when you're
yeah,
in the briefing phase up at altitude, dude,
yeah,
that's pretty solid. And you could also tie in some of the miscommunications, et cetera, maybe with ATC. It'd be you got my wheels turning.
dude, Jet, that would be awesome
Yeah,
because
because you're bringing
I told you that we don't do enough hangar flying. We do
correct.
not we as a group, we don't do enough hangar flying to know that you flew into San Jose the other day and they gave you this funky departure and you had to circle and go back over the VOR over the airport 200 knots or 210 because of the flaps, because you're out of class B. So maybe Chat GPT could identify
Dude, I
that
got
stuff for you.
dude, I got another one for you.
What's
Check
that?
this out, because I already know that NOTAMs and pilots don't always get along, meaning we don't always read them or reference them. Probably
Right.
should, but we're not the best at it. And they've gotten a little bit better. JEPS is kind of now highlighting, in red when we go into certain airfields that, these are now closed. But you can also have ChatGPT tell you the NOTAMs. If you said, hey, I'm going to shoot the approach to 17 right in Denver, yada, 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 it could actually give you, hey, by the way, on the taxi plan that you briefed, Mike is closed. That because you see where I'm going with it, because it
Yeah.
knows it. You programmed it. It hears you. It takes it in and gives you, hey, I know the taxi route it sells. What are the threats? You could identify the threats is what you could do on the taxi end. Which runway encourages is one of the biggest threats?
Dude, how
I
about
don't know
you
if
and
I
me? We
let's.
get together. How about you and me? It would be our retirement plan. How about that, brother?
Dude, there's a lot of good stuff going on in Silicon Valley on this space.
Yeah. Wow. Man, we could do that. Well, look, I've kept you for an hour and 20 minutes, and I didn't mean to keep you that long, but this is interesting stuff. I love it.
And we just started a business too.
Yeah. 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 Well, and a new business. So as I said, I definitely want to promote your book. All right.
Yep,
Not because
appreciate
I
it.
know you or anything like that. It really is great, um, great stuff. I put this out to all my fellow check pilots because we've got new slides that we're talking about SOPs and procedural drift and different things. And I said to the guys, if you want great examples of where we were, how we've come to this, read this book because you do take all the it could be considered dry or clinical, and you actually give it human feelings. I can read it and I can understand it and I can be there. I can feel what those guys are going through, the pressure of this or that. So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed the way that you conveyed all that
Thank you.
information. You did a great job.
I
Can't tell
appreciate
you
it.
that
I
enough.
appreciate it. One of the greatest compliments I got was from a fellow writer that said, Andrew, you took a very complex accident and made me understand it. And I don't know anything about flying airplanes. And so, somewhere in there, I think that gift, I'm not going to say it was easy, because if I had to write it with the lens that I wanted somebody who's not a pilot read it and to go, I
Yeah.
can learn from that accident and apply it in my plant, in my manufacturing plant, or wherever I go. And to do that, I broke it down, and out of that is what you guys read. And thank you. I appreciate it. Took some time, but I think the message is well worth it. And interesting enough, Taco, I've never marketed the book, and it's something because I got real busy with BP and COVID.
Yeah.
Um, what I didn't have the opportunity to do is really get it out there. And so I appreciate you bringing me on the show and doing the same marketing. I will leave you with this. Prime Video's reached out, and when they want me to make a trailer for them to see if it's worth going on into and make a series out of.
Really? Put a sizzle reel
Yeah.
together, huh?
Yeah, and I
Wow.
will tell you, it's my second movie offer on the book. The first one was a guy named Todd Phillips, and he is, which most people probably don't know, is Bradley Cooper's partner. And they wrote Hangover together, and then saw the
Uh-huh.
book, they saw the play off Tom Wolfe, I think, the right stuff, and they saw this and
Yeah.
it was like, oh, there's got to be a good story to be told. And so they reached out and said, hey, are you interested in it? At the time in my life, it didn't work out for me to do it, so now I got an opportunity to maybe do something else. And I've started to flesh out what that trailer would look like.
Yeah, well, how would you make that into a movie?
No, that is
Because
secret,
it's
my
almost
friend.
like Aviation. Hmm?
That's secret. That's secret, no foreign. That's secret, no taco.
All
Because
right, well,
I got a great idea how to do it. Because your push point, I get it, and I'm 100% aligned with what you're like. How would you ever do that, dude? I got it, but I just don't want to talk about it yet.
all right, all right. Well, I'll be waiting to promote that movie when it comes out, and proud to say, hopefully before our 40th anniversary
There you
of
go.
TBS there, Hotel 88. So
I
who
got to get
knows, man?
writing.
Yeah, you'll be famous. Bradley Cooper show up with you.
Yeah, but that'd be
Yeah.
nuts.
What's always funny is I tell the cops on board, I go, hey, look, man, if anything happens, bulletproof door, all shots go right over the bulletproof door. You take out the FO. I'll land the airplane. When we lawyer up and get the book rights and movie rights, Brad Pitt plays me.
Nice.
I go, and the
Deal.
FO's like, "Hey, man, what about me?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're dead." So
Yeah.
we'll find the guy like Bill Paxton for you. All right? Yeah. Hey, game
What?
over, man. Game
Okay.
over. Put her in
Dude,
charge.
that's awesome.
Oh, shoot. All right, brother. Well, listen, I would like to bring you back on, and this is taped. So, any aviators out there that are listening to this tonight, if you have questions, put them in the comment section. This
Yeah,
post on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Put them in the comment section. I'll collect all the comments, and then we'll come back. And I'd love to have you back on for another kind of Q&A based off of, say, some of the comments,
perfect.
and then we could do a live one based off of that, even going off of the questions I already had, and then what people may be interested in.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to.
That
There's
work?
still plenty to talk about.
A lot, a lot. Oh, we haven't even scratched the surface. Well, listen, thank you so much, Dirt Man. I appreciate it, brother. And
Likewise.
if you hang on for 1 second, I'm going to say goodbye, and then I'll get up with you in a sec. All right.
Deal, brother.
All right. Hold on 1 sec. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy that, especially if you are in the aviation field. This is really near and dear to my heart. We deal with this every day because we want to make sure your families are safe in the back and you have the best, absolutely awesome crews up front taking care of you. That is our job. We toe the line, and it's a very difficult profession to be in sometimes. It's black and white. You've got to make sure that you don't hit the wrong rudder on the engine out, or do something. So keeping everybody safe is in our best interest. And if I wouldn't put my family in the back of somebody's jet, they're not going to fly. So you take care and sleep well, knowing that there are professionals out there and they care about this. And you have other guys that that do stuff like this that is making the profession even better. So take care until I see you next week. Adios, hasta luego, auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss, sheshene, au revoir, domo arigato gozaimasu, no shinde kudasai. Ciao, arrivederci, tashikura, assalamu alaikum, mahala, do vidjenia. I think I hit them all, and I'm going to end with this one. Take care.